Presenter Alpha C. Alan Rosenstein was a man who had reached his position by displaying incredible skill as an administrator, while displaying little to no political will or agenda. Primus Alan Rosenstein was the exact opposite. What was thought to be a safe choice that would not harass the members of the First Circuit and give ComStar a break from the aggressive actions of his predecessor turned out to be a political savvy fanatic who would push the Order further down the road of conflict. His first action as Primus was to name replacements for the two First Circuit presenters that had perished alongside Primus Takami. To the surprise to everyone else, he nominated two extremist hardliners, religious fanatics that had no substantial power base in the Order itself and represented a loud but very small minority. The new position changed the power dynamics in the First Circuit massively. To support this shift in direction on an ideological basis, Rosenstein published his own manifest, Blessed Destiny. Using quotes of the founders of ComStar, Blake, Toyama, and Karpov, he presented ComStar with a new blueprint to fulfill its destiny. Core component was it to manipulate the great houses into fighting each other and to improve ComStar's power by using them as unwitting pawns in the great game. The key to do so was the Order's advantage in information and technology, something that had to be improved and protected at all cost. But in other passages of the book, he evolved the approach and mused that the direct use of military force could be a future option for ComStar, a type of operation that was first attempted by the beloved Primus York, as Rosenstein gleefully pointed out. At the end, Blessed Destiny was to become one of the most influential books inside of ComStar. Another topic that was important was the role of the periphery. Primus Rosenstein had a passion for the study of history. A special favorite of him was Primus Marshall and her attention toward the periphery. The knowledge of her experience there should serve him well. In the year 3000, the recruitment potential of ComStar was drying up. The population of Terra was already completely covered by the efforts of ComStar, and the rest of the inner sphere was suffering from massive attrition and fragmentation, not to speak of a growing distrust against ComStar. Rosenstein solved this problem by following Primus Marshall's lead. A mass recruitment campaign in the poor and disenfranchised worlds of the periphery was started. But the overall behavior and policy of the Primus was twisted and full of malintent. He used the media to propagandize the investments and benefits that ComStar was giving to the periphery to improve the reputation among the hopeful acolytes to be. Yet, at the same time, he was lobbying hard in the First Circuit to actually curtail and reduce these very expenses. He himself hated the periphery and viewed it as a source for problems. He also feared that it would become a terrible danger for the complete inner sphere if full communications were to be restored. The news featured the benefits of trade initiated by ComStar, but the truth was that ComStar had removed resources from all construction projects and put a permanent freeze on all HPG extensions. The worlds at the fringe of humanity remained utterly dependent on Jumpships to communicate with each other, and both ships were overwhelmingly controlled by ComStar. In this way, it was impossible for Periphery to improve their situation. But at the same time, the recruitment campaign was a resounding success. Countless applicants from Periphery came to join ComStar. Over time, they should start to outnumber the sphere-born members of the Order. The organization was destined to be made up by people who were brought up in the borders of mankind, who had no connection, and in most cases, not even sympathy for the inner sphere and the successor states. People for whom the Order was the only purpose and single loyalty. Another, far smaller event was the introduction of a new acolyte into the order. Thomas Marik, son of Captain General Janos Marik, asked to join the order. It was cause for celebrations because he was the heir of a Captain General over the FWL, which made him the highest-ranking house member to ever swear fealty to the Blessed Order and to follow the word of Blake. The true extent of this decision and the role he should play are an important part of history that shall be presented at another time. Rosenstein's beginning as Primus were strong, but degraded over time. The very same presenters he had appointed started to question his competence, and the others were rather unwilling to support him. On several occasions, his proposals for funding to enlarge the ComStar Guards and Militia were voted down unanimously by the rebellious First Circuit. In the future, things should get far worse. In 3001, the Third Succession War had turned into a tedious dragging on. One region where this was clearly visible was the border between the Lyrans and Dracs. Officially, the Steiner forces were on an offensive, but the troops were so exhausted that even the ruthless social generals of this house preferred to let them slow down. They used the delays in communication and overstated problems with logistics to give their men some rest. On the other side was the extremely centralized combine of Hohiro Kurita, unable to make any quick moves, decisive reactions, or even counteroffensives. Officers as well as rank and file also suffered under an ever-increasing atmosphere of mistrust and paranoia, paralyzing them. And every additional resource was used to reinforce the fighting against the Federated Suns. Primus and First Circuit were rather displeased with such development. They wanted to increase the overall hostility between the war realms and rekindle the fighting. So a plan was hatched to use a threat from the periphery to provoke a deeper involvement of both houses. Primus Rosenstein only approved it half-heartedly, but it should forever be associated with his legacy. Rom would commence with a Jolly Roger plan. It meant that ComStar would supply several pirates operating in the periphery with military hardware and supplies. With these enhanced capabilities, the new petty kings and warlords could operate inside Lyran and Draconis space, striking and looting targets that were far more interesting than the usual victims in the periphery. By the spring of 3002, several of these newly formed bandit kings struck along the periphery borders of the Lyran Commonwealth. Within half a year, the same pirates attacked the Draconis Combine. Both sides blamed the other for sponsoring the bandit raids, and as a result, escalated their conflict. It really seemed like a resounding success for the strategies outlined in Blessed Destiny. The fighting between the houses increased rapidly. Both moved troops from the former hegemony worlds, close to Terra, away into the periphery, giving the people there some respite from the constant war. And no one blamed ComStar for anything. It was a masterwork of manipulation, and Primus Rosenstein was more than happy to take full credit for this operation. In 3004, things started to get nasty. Two bandit kings, Blackjack McGurk and Darlene Dunson, united their forces. Each only fielded about a battalion of troops. However, combined they had almost a regiment of BattleMechs and support forces. As the top dog, they also attract other smaller groups and crew, who further bolstered their numbers. A force that allowed them to reach deep into the Commonwealth and to decisively overstep the perimeters of Jolly Roger. The Primus dispatched Presenter Quintero of the ComStar Guards Militia to put them back into line. But here things escalated even more. At the end of the negotiations, a sizable number of ComStar Guards and pirates, including Darlene Dunson, were all dead. Her partner, ally, and lover Blackjack McGurk retaliated by attacking and destroying the HPG stations on the planets Lost and Canal, killing the ComStar personnel in the process. Jolly Roger had gone bad. To save the situation, the Primus ordered the 1st Division of the ComStar Guard and Militia to wipe out the renegade pirates. The battle lasted for almost 3 days on the isolated, unmapped world of Trisha. 8 jumps at the periphery. In the end, Blackjack McGurk's combat experience allowed him and his men to demand a hefty price. His own forces were virtually wiped out, but they achieved a 2.3 to 1 kill ratio against the Green Com Guards. The blame for this debacle was laid on the man who had willingly taken the credit for it, Primus Rosenstein. To make matters worse, a new force suddenly appeared in the sphere, baffling even the almighty ComStar and the omniscient Grom. In 3005, a group calling themselves Wolves Dragoons appeared in the Federated Stanza. The First Circuit demanded of Col Sims, the aging presenter Rom, to explain the origin of the 5 fully armed and equipped BattleMech regiments. When Sims' operatives were unable to penetrate Dragoon security and 2 agents died in the attempt, he was relieved of his post. Vizar Christopher was his replacement. The most concerning thing were the new BattleMechs and ships in pristine condition used by the Dragoons. And to make it even worse, none of them matched the worn and jury-rigged types common in the sphere. Some followed superior Star League patterns, while others were even of completely unknown new designs. A display of technology and innovation that unsettled ComStar. When even the economy crumbled and the Sibyl entered freefall, the First Circuit lost all faith in the Primus. In spring 3006, the First Circuit requested the resignation of Primus Rosenstein, citing his failing in both the Dragoon and Jolly Roger affair as sufficient reason. Alan Rosenstein resigned as Primus a week later, allowing the First Circuit to select his replacement. For the next 10 years, he would spend as presenter of a St. Ives HPG station, before passing away as a broken and lonely man.